So, what do I mean when I'm talking about tacit sources? So this is thing. It's easier to start with codified sources first. Well, this is a knowledge that is in a set of written instructions. So this could be stuff that's in a library, for example. The stuff it could be software code. It could be anything that's in a book, for example. Stuff that's written down in a set of instructions. And what we had found from the 60s, Michael Polanyi had talked about this, is that there's so much knowledge that experts or individuals can possess or teams can possess that is really difficult to actually put into instructions. We call that knowledge, that stuff that's difficult to codify, tacit knowledge. And there's a whole large, most of what we know is actually most of what we can gather as individuals in our organizations is actually tacit knowledge. So there's many different facets of knowledge management that includes sort of finding the sources of knowledge, which would be the acquisition of knowledge, and then sort of ranking and prioritizing the acquisition of knowledge. That could be coming from individuals, for example, but also could be coming from external organizations, from sort of regulatory organizations, as well as the sort of trade organizations, could be coming from many different sources within the organization as well. So not only I mentioned individuals, but you could be thinking about teams or departments and all of these different things in an organization that can sort of contain knowledge, and you want to sort of manage that as you're doing it. So often, most people think about knowledge management as just sort of simply storing of knowledge, but it's much more to that. It's as I mentioned, it's the acquisition. It's the storage of this knowledge. Then it's thinking about how do you actually retrieve that in an effective way. This is one of the problems we have with big data nowadays, is that there's so much knowledge being stored, there's so much experiences, say it's much more experiences or data being stored, that it's really difficult to actually retrieve it in an effective way. And we're running into this problem of just, the knowledge storage problem, where we can sort of think about, well, how do you retrieve it to make sense of it? Then, as well, is how do you actually utilize that knowledge in an effective way? That's really important to think about that. And all these different processes make up knowledge management. So it's not just about the tools or software in terms of storing the knowledge, for example. So like SAP, as well as sort of all the different databases that are available, as well as like OpenText, for example, all these different software that's available. And it's even more important when you think about that, it's not just those particular sort of tools, but in, especially when you start thinking about tacit knowledge and the possession that most of us actually possess, and we're all experts, we're all individual experts in something, that most of the stuff that we actually possess is tacit knowledge. So it becomes much more bigger than sort of having that explicit codified knowledge. And I think why this is important to think about in knowledge management systems are going to become more and more important is because we are a knowledge-based economy. And that means that we're storing more and more data, as well as this data is becoming more important to the competitive advantage of a firm, right? Is becoming much more central as we start moving, especially if we start moving business models online, for example. One of the things that I wanted to come back to, passwords. One of the things that really irritates me nowadays, and I'm calling this sort of password insanity, and this is sort of a response. We have increasing complexity of passwords, and this is in response to sort of prevent other people from hacking into an organization's computers. So at my particular institution, for example, we have to change our passwords on a regular basis. I understand why. It's great practice. It's probably phenomenal practice. But then it also neglects the problem the problem of sort of possession of knowledge and managing this knowledge of passwords, for example. So individuals are really terrible. We know that sort of from behavioral science. We're terrible at remembering things. We often make up things that didn't necessarily exist. We believe that they existed, but we sort of piece things together because our memory is so terrible. And not only individuals, but organizations have actually really terrible memory. We know this, that organizations forget on a regular basis. And this forgetting is often caused from things like technological obsolescence. So technologies are not necessarily all that relevant these days, some of them. So for example, 8-track tapes, who uses those, right? Um, as well as sort of employee turnover, where individuals are coming and going out of the organization. So one particular individual that's in one department might remember a password, they might actually code that in and write that down, but then when they leave the organization a few months later, there's no record of what that password is, and you're running into, as an organization, you're running the problem of sort of password management and how to actually control that. So I think this is a really important problem that we have to sort of sort out. I don't know if there's tools available that can do that. You can write them down if you want as tools. I do use different tools. I use one tool myself, but I'm sure there's many other ones. But this is a real problem that we have to sort of get a hold of. There's also, I think we should also think about improving knowledge management software to focus much more, and this sort of elucidates, or this sort of focuses on the problem of making sure that we focus much more on tacit knowledge, the things that are really difficult to sort of codify. And that is sort of kind of an explicit example of that, because we don't want to codify passwords, right? That we're going to run into problems with that. But there's so much more stuff that is difficult to codify, like how do you solve a complex problem, for example. We don't often know how to do that. We just come up with the answer, or we sort of think about the different steps along the way. So this is one thing that's kind of an open call to for people that are doing software development or thinking about knowledge management systems, is to think about how we can actually codify the tacit knowledge. Not only codify and force codifying tacit knowledge, that's sort of the easy way out. That's going to be really that's going to take a long time for it to happen. Simply because like knowledge is actually infinite. There's so many more possibilities if you think about the interactions of knowledge and ideas, but as well as creating knowledge management systems that are forcing sort of a tighter relationship between individuals and the organization and the technology. So when you have these sort of moments of knowledge transfer where, so for example, people are leaving the organization, that there's not necessarily going to be a breakdown in the knowledge transfer. So it's much more sort of a cohesive relationship and creating much more of these complex interrelations that we have to think about. So if you like these videos and you want to help out with the sharing economy proofreading app that I'm building, reciprocity.com, the E is spelled with a 3. You can check it out. You could subscribe to the YouTube videos. That does help out. You're amazing if you have done that. Actually, I should say this. You are so cool if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do like this video if you think it's great. I could do more of this kind of stuff. But in the meantime, take care and have a good day. Bye.